May our Father, Messiah, and Holy Spirit be with us. In those days, when there was no king in Israel, this is Judges 19, Nevi'im 19. Well, Nevi'im is writing. So this is Judges 19. In those days, when there was no king in Israel, a Levite residing at the other end of the hill country of Ephraim took to himself a concubine from Bethlehem and Yehuda. Once his concubine deserted him, leaving him for her father's house in Bethlehem, Yehuda, and she stayed there a full 4 months. Then her husband set out with an attendant and a pair of donkeys, and went after her to woe her and to win her back. She admitted him into her father's house, and when the girl's father saw him, he received him warmly. His father-in-law, the girl's father, pressed him, and he stayed with him 3 days. They ate and drank and lodged there. Early in the morning of the 4th day, he started to leave, but the girl's father said to his son-in-law, "Eat something to give you strength. Then you can leave." So the two of them sat down and they feasted together. Then the girl's father said to the man, "Won't you stay overnight and enjoy yourself?" The man started to leave, but his father-in-law kept urging him until he turned back and spent the night there. Early in the morning of the 5th day, he was about to leave when the girl's father said, "Come, have a bite." The two of them ate, dawdling until past noon. Then the man, his concubine, and his attendant started to leave. His father-in-law, the girl's father, said to him, "Look, the day is waning toward evening. Do stop for the night. See, the day is declining. Spend the night here and enjoy yourself. You can start early tomorrow on your journey and head for home." But the man refused to stay for the night. He set out and traveled as far as the vicinity of Yebus, that is Yerushalayim. He had with him a pair of laden donkeys, and his concubine was with him. Since they were close to Yebus and the day was very far spent, the attendant said to his master, "Let us turn aside to this town of the Yebusites and spend the night in it." But his master said to him, "We will not turn aside to a town of aliens, for we're not of Israel. We will continue to Gibeah." "Come," he said to his attendant, "let us approach one of those places and spend the night either in Gibeah or in Ramah." So they traveled on, and the sun set when they were near Gibeah of Benjamin. They turned off there and wanted to spend the night in Gibeah. He went and sat down in the town square, but nobody took them indoors to spend the night. In the evening, an old man came along from his property outside the town. This man hailed from the hill country of Ephraim and resided at Gibeah, where the townspeople were Benjamites. He happened to see the wayfarer in the town square, where the old man inquired, "Are you going to, and where do you come from?" He replied, "We are traveling from Bethlehem and Yehuda to the other end of the hill country of Ephraim. That is where I live. I made a journey to Bethlehem of Yehuda, and now I am on my way to the house of our Father in heaven. And nobody has taken me indoors. We have both bruised straw and feed for our donkeys, and bread and wine for me and your handmaid, and for the attendant with your servants. With us, we lack nothing. Rest easy," said the old man. "Let me take care of all your needs. Do not on any account spend the night in the square." And he took him into his house. He mixed fodder for the donkeys. Then they bathed their feet and ate and drank while they were enjoying themselves. The men of the town, a depraved lot, had gathered about the house and were pounding on the door. They called out to the aged one owner of the house, "Bring out the man who has came into your house, so that we can be intimate with him." The owner of the house went out and said to them, "Please, my friends, do not commit such a wrong. Since this man has entered my house, do not perpetrate this outrage. Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. Let me bring them out to you. Have your pleasure of them. Do with them what you do with. Have your pleasure of them. Do what you like with them. But don't do that outrageous thing to this man." But the men would not listen to him. So the man seized his concubine and pushed her out to them. They raped her and abused her all night long until morning, and they let her go when dawn broke. Toward morning, the woman came back, and as it was growing light, she collapsed at the entrance of the man's house where her husband was. When her husband arose in the morning, he opened the door. I can't even imagine this whole situation happening. When her husband arose in the morning, he opened the doors of the house and went out to continue his journey, and there was the woman, his concubine, lying at the entrance of the house. With her hands on the threshold, "Get up," he said to her, "let us go." But there was no reply. So the man placed her on the donkey and set out for home. When he came home, he picked up a knife and took hold of his concubine and cut her up limb by limb into 12 parts. He sent them throughout the territory of Israel, and everyone who saw it cried out, "Never has such a thing happened to be seen from the day the Israelites came out of the land of Mitzrayim to this day. Put your mind to this, take counsel and decide." Thereupon all the Israelites from Dan to Beersheba and from the land of Gilead marched forth, and the community assembled to a man before our Father in heaven at Mizpah. All the leaders of the people and all the tribes of Israel presented themselves in the assembly of Elohim's people. 400,000 fighting men on foot. The Benjamites heard that the Israelites had come up to Mizpah. The Israelites said, "Tell us, how did this evil thing happen?" And the Levite, the husband of the murdered woman, replied, "My concubine and I came to Gibeah at Benjamin to spend the night. The citizens of Gibeah set out to harm me. They gathered against me around the house in the night. They meant to kill me, and they ravaged my concubine until she died. So I took hold of my concubine, and I cut her in pieces and sent them through every part of Israel's territory, for an outrageous act of depravity had been committed in Israel. Now you are all Israelites. Produce a plan of action here and now." Then all the people rose as one man and declared, "We will not go back to our homes. We will not enter our houses. But this is what we would do to Gibeah. We will wage war against it according to lot. We will take from all the tribes of Israel 10 men to the 100, 100 to the 1,000, and 1,000 to the 10,000 to supply provisions for the troops to prepare for their going to Gibeah and Benjamin. For all the outrage it has committed in Israel." So all the men of Israel united as one man, massed against the town, and the tribes of Israel sent men through the whole tribe of Benjamin, saying, What is this evil thing that has happened among you? Come, hand over those scoundrels in Gibeah, so that we may put them to death and stamp out the evil from Israel. But the Benjamites will not yield to the demand of their fellow Israelites. So the Benjamites gathered from their towns to Gibeah in order to take the field against the Israelites. On that day, the Benjamites mustered from the towns 26,000 fighting men, mustered apart from the inhabitants of Gibeah, 700 picked men. Of all this force, 700 picked men were left-handed. Every one of them could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. The men of Israel, other than Benjamin, mustered 400,000 fighting men, warriors to a man. They proceeded to Bethel and inquired of Elohim. The Israelites asked, Who of us shall advance first to fight the Benjamites?" And our Father in heaven replied, "Yehudah first." So the Israelites arose in the morning and encamped against Gibeah. The men of Israel took the field against the Benjamites. The men of Israel drew up in battle order against them at Gibeah. But the Benjamites issued from Gibeah, and that day they struck down 22,000 men of Israel. Now the army of the men of Israel and again drew up in battle order at the same place as they had on the first day. For the Israelites had gone up and wept before our Father in heaven until evening. They had inquired of our Father in heaven, "Shall we again join battle with our kinsmen, the Benjamites?" And our Father in heaven had replied, "March against them." The Israelites advanced against the Benjamites on the second day, but the Benjamites came out from Gibeah against them on the second day and struck down 18,000 more of the Israelites, all of them fighting men. Then all the Israelites, all the army, went up and came to Bethel, and they sat there, weeping before our Father in heaven. They fasted that day until evening and presented burnt offerings and offerings of well-being to our Father in heaven. The Israelites inquired of our Father in heaven, for the ark of Elohim's covenant was there in those days. And Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, ministered before him in those days. "Shall we again take the field against our kinsmen, the Benjamites, or shall we not?" Our Father in heaven answered, "Go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hands." Israel put men in ambush against Gibeah on all sides, and on the third day the Israelites went up against the Benjamites as before and engaged them in battle at Gibeah. The Benjamites dashed out to meet the army and were drawn away from the town onto the roads, of which one runs to Bethel and the other to Gibeah. As before, they started out by striking some of the men dead in the open field, about 30 men of Israel. The Benjamites thought they are being routed before us as previously, but the Israelites had planned we would take to flight and draw them away from the town to the roads. And while the main body of the Israelites had moved away from their positions and had drawn up in a battle order at Baal Tamar, the Israelite ambush was rushing out from its position at Merah, Gibeah. Thus 10,000 picked men of all Israel came to a point south of Gibeah, and the battle was furious before they realized that disaster was approaching. Our Father in heaven routed the Benjamites before Israel. That day the Israelites slew 25,100 men of Benjamin, all of them fighting men. Then the Benjamites realized that they were routed. Now the Israelites had yielded ground to the Benjamites, for they relied on the ambush which they had laid against Gibeah. One ambush quickly deployed against Gibeah, and the other ambush advanced and put the whole town to the sword. A time had been agreed upon by the Israelite men with those in ambush when a huge column of smoke was sent up from the town. The Israelite men were to turn about in battle. Benjamin had begun by striking dead about 30 Israelite men, and they thought they are being routed before us as in the previous fighting. But when the pillar of smoke began to rise from the city, The Benjamites looked behind them, and there was the whole town going up in smoke to the sky. And now the Israelites turned about, and the men of Benjamin were thrown into panic, for they realized that disaster had overtaken them. They retreated before the men of Israel along the road to the wilderness, where the fighting caught up with them. Meanwhile, those from the towns were massacring them in it. They encircled the Benjamites, pursued them, and trod them down from Manoah to a point opposite. We should really be taking that away from him for real. Manoah to a point opposite Gibeah on the east. That day, 18,000 men of Benjamin fell. All of them brave men. They turned and fled to the wilderness, to the rock of Ramah. But the Israelites picked off another 5,000 on the roads, and continuing in hot pursuit of them, up to Gidon, they slew 2,000 more. Thus the total number of Benjamites who fell that day came to 25,000 fighting men, of all of them brave. But 600 men turned and fled to the wilderness, to the rock of Ramah. They remained at the rock of Ramah 4 months. The men of Israel, meanwhile, turned back to the rest of the Benjamites and put them to the sword. Towns, people, cattle, everything that remained. Finally, they set fire to all the towns that were left. Now the men of Israel had taken an oath at Mizpah, none of us will give his daughter in marriage to a Benjamite. The people came to Bethel and sat there before Elohim until evening. They wailed and wept bitterly, and they said, O our Father in heaven, Elohim of Israel, why has this happened in Israel, that one tribe must now be missing from Israel? Early the next day, the people built an altar there, and they brought burnt offerings and offerings of wild beings. The Israelites asked, Is there anyone from all the tribes of Israel who failed to come up to the assembly before our Father in heaven? For a solemn oath had been taken concerning anyone who did not go up to our Father in heaven at Mizpah, he shall be put to death. The Israelites now relented toward their kinsmen at the Benjamites, and they said, This day one tribe has been cut off from Israel. What can we do to provide wives for those who are left, seeing that we have sworn by our Father in heaven not to give any of our daughters to them in marriage? They inquired, Is there anyone from the tribes of Israel who did not go up to our Father in heaven at Mizpah? Now no one from Yapesh Gilead had come to the camp, to the assembly. For when the roll of the troops was taken, not one of the inhabitants of Yabesh Gilead was present. So the assemblage dispatched 12,000 of the warriors, instructing them as follows: Go and put the inhabitants of Yabesh Gilead to the sword, woman and children included. This is what you are to do: prescribe every man and every woman who has known a man canonically. They found among the inhabitants of Yabesh Gilead 400 maidens who had not known a man carnally, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. Then the whole community sent word to the Benjamites who were at the rock of Ramah, and offered them terms of peace. Thereupon the Benjamites returned, and they gave them the girls who had been spared from the woman of Yabesh Gilead, but there was not enough of them. Now the people have relented toward Benjamin, for our Father in heaven had made a branch in the tribes of Israel. So the elders of the community asked, What can we do about wives for those who are left, since the women of Benjamin have been killed off? For they said, There must be a saving remnant of Benjamin, that a tribe may not be blotted out of Israel. Yet we cannot give them any of our daughters as wives, since the Israelites had taken an oath, Cursed be anyone who gives a wife to Benjamin. They said, The annual feast of our Father in heaven is not being held at Shiloh. It lies north of Bethel, east of the highway that runs from Bethel to Shechem, and south of Labonah. So they instructed the Benjamites as follows: Go and lie in wait in the vineyards. As soon as you see the girls of Shiloh coming out to join in the dances, come out from the vineyards. Let each of you seize a wife from among the girls of Shiloh, and be off for the land of Benjamin. And if their fathers or brothers come to us to complain, we shall say to them, Be generous to them for our sake. We could not provide any of them with a wife on account of the war, and you would have incurred guilt if yourselves had given them wives. The Benjamites did so. They took wife from the dancers whom they carried off, as many as they themselves numbered. Then they went back to their own territory and rebuilt their towns and settled in them. Thereupon the Israelites dispersed, each to his own tribe and clan. Everyone departed for his own territory. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did as he pleased. May our Father and Son, Holy Spirit with us. I pray you have a blessed day. Amen.